Hello everyone and welcome back to the Journey to Grandmaster series. And I know I said I would return when I fix my sleep schedule, but I never fixed my sleep schedule. But anyways, even though I haven't made any Journey to Grandmaster videos in a year, I have been continuing studying the game. And you know that chess endgame book I've mentioned a year ago? I'm still studying it. But yeah, let's get into this game that I played recently against a 1300. Starts off with e4, c6, bishop c4, which is actually a very bad move because d5, attacking the bishop, e takes d5, c takes d5, and now the bishop has to move, and he plays bishop e5, which allows me to develop my light square bishop, and if bishop takes, knight takes, my plan is to go knight f6, e6, develop the bishop, and I should be chilling. But instead of trading, he plays bishop e2, and now black is essentially white here because white spent too much tempo moving his bishop, so knight c6, developing the knight, knight f3, and here I chose to play e5 instead of e6. e6 is usually normal Caro-Kann moves, but I played e5 instead, taking the center, and here he plays d4, attacking the e5 pawn. And I locked it down because if something like e takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop c5 developing the knight, the pawn would kind of be weak, and if something like knight b3, bishop b6, keeping pressure on this f2 square and kinda corralling the knight here, his only escape square is d2 right now. But in this position, if knight takes, I will be able to solidify this weak pawn on d5, and this d5 pawn is not a weakness anymore. So I play e4, not taking, because this pawn is not a weakness right now, due to the fact that this pawn blocks the pawn, my d5 pawn. And the only move for white to go to is e5, which is an outpost, and because it's an outpost, taking is kind of forced here. And then something like bishop c6 to protect the pawn would be good, but I didn't see. Here I got too lazy with my calculation, and after takes, I didn't see bishop c6, so I thought this pawn was kinda hanging, and taking wouldn't be that good. So instead I wanted him to take me instead while developing my piece, so I go bishop d6, attacking the knight, preparing to take the knight twice. But the thing is, if I do take the knight here, for example after c3, it doesn't really work as this pawn is also hanging. So bishop d3 is not a good move, taking immediately was a better move, and my opponent plays c4 here. Point of this is to attack the d5 pawn, and this move is actually very bad because it actually doesn't do anything. For example, the best move is bishop takes e5, d takes e5, and then d4, and the point is you're protecting the pawn, and you have more space on the enemy side of the board, and this pawn cannot be defended by any piece, and will eventually be taken. And it also stops the knight from developing to c3 as well, which is a very good move, d4. But instead I didn't spend that much time here, and I play knight takes e5, which is a mistake, d takes, bishop takes, which allows queen to take, and now he's attacking the b7 pawn and the e5 bishop. And here I was debating whether to go c7 or f6, and the point of c7 is it protects the pawn and the bishop, but f6 attacks the b2 pawn here, and I chose queen f6. If I calculated a little more, probably would have went c7 here, but f6 is second best to move, and queen takes e4. If queen takes b7 here, I calculated c6, he cannot take the rook, and he has to drop back, and then rook b8 wins, because there's 3 attackers on this pawn, and he has to move, and this pawn will be taken, and this rook is also kind of trapped, and he hasn't castled his king yet, so he's completely lost here. I was hoping he would take on b7, but he didn't, so e4. Now c6, protecting the pawn, also attacking the g2 pawn, queen c2 defending his pawn, this is also a mistake. The engine wants queen d3, and then bishop takes, rook g1, then you drop back, and then bishop g5, Queen e6 attacking both pawns here, and black is slightly better. It also attacks the h2 pawn as well. But yeah, queen c2 was played, protecting the b2 pawn, and then something similar happened to the line I just showed you, so bishop takes g2, rook g1 attacking the bishop, bishop back to c6, bishop g5 attacking the queen, and here I wanted a queen trade, which is also the best move because queen g6 pins the rook to the bishop and also attacks the queen, threatens to take on b2, and here he should have played bishop d3 attacking my queen, then something like h5 attacking the pawn, and black is still better here, but this is a slightly better defense. But he takes the queen, which opens up my rook, and now there's two attackers here on the h2 pawn, and there's an attack on the b2 pawn, so he cannot defend both pawns here. He plays knight c3, defending the b2 pawn, bishop takes h2, and now rook g4, the only move for the rook, because if rook f1, bishop g2 wins the rook. So rook g4, now knight f6 attacking the rook. I also wanted him to trade here, because if he trades his dark squared bishop for my dark squared bishop has total control over all the dark squares in his position, and taking my knight is exactly what he did. So bishop takes f6, which is a big mistake. G takes f6, and then long castles, trying to get the d file. And then here I play f5. The best move was actually bishop e5, just taking control over the dark squares on his king side here, or the queen side where his king castled. But I play f5, potentially going e5 and having my bishop drop back to g7 if it has to, basically having more control on my side of the board, to move my bishop wherever it wants. And then the rook moves to the d file to try to have control here. And instead of playing something risky, like bishop e5, I wanted to play this, and let's say d3, and then rook h4 attacks the weak pawn, and he'll have to try to defend it. But if he actually goes rook d2 here, bishop f4 just wins. Instead of doing any forceful moves here, I just played something passive, like castles, for safety. And then my opponent plays knight d5 for no reason at all. This move is terrible, it doesn't do anything. If knight e7 check, king g7 is fine. If knight f6 check, king g7 is fine. So I just play king g7, which is the best move. Kinda restricting this knight here because he can't do anything. This knight is terrible. It also restricts the d file from white. And here my opponent decides to play rook h1, attacking my dark squared bishop, which gives me free tempo to just go bishop e5 attacking his rook and his queen side. He moves his rook to the h file trying to go check, and here, usually in the endgame I'm very cocky because I'm studying the endgame, and I know I can't lose in this position, so I didn't really calculate that much. So I just wanted to trade into an easier endgame. But the best move for king safety is bishop takes d5, c takes d5, and if you were to ever check on h7, I have f6 now because the knight is not here. But instead let's go into a two bishops versus bishop and knight endgame, where I'm a pawn up and you have a weakness on f2. This pawn's not really weak because you have b3 solidifying it, but there's another weak pawn on f2. So I thought I was winning here because I could just make a passer and stuff. And I am winning here if he does trade. But instead of playing rook takes h8, rook takes h8, rook takes and king takes into this endgame, where I have complete dark square control, he plays a very bad move, f4, and this wins immediately due to, well, one of the moves is bishop takes, c takes, and then check. He can't take back because of check, and this wins the game. The other move is bishop takes f4 immediately, and again he can't take because I take his rook. So king d1, and now bishop takes d5, c takes d5, and here I can just move my rook away from this file, and I'll be completely fine because after h7 check, I always have king f6 with king safety, also going after this pawn. So he plays f4. Instead of going takes, again I was cocky, I didn't calculate much. I know I was winning this endgame. He has a weakness here, So I did shallow calculation and I just went for the third best move, which is just taking into a much easier endgame. And I go d6, keeping the pressure on this pawn, but the best move instead of bishop d6 is actually taking. And after rook h8, asking for a trade, takes, you take the pawn back, and then after king c2, king takes h8, and you're winning because you have 3 passed pawns, and this pawn will never go down. So bishop d6, my opponent plays a3, which does absolutely nothing. I didn't know why he played it. I was never planning to go bishop b4. My goal is to keep pressure on this pawn because it's a weakness and it's the opposite color of his own bishop, so his bishop can never defend it. So because I know his bishop can never defend this pawn, I go bishop takes d5, c takes d5, and now this pawn is blockaded, will never move because I'm blockading it on an opposite square of his own bishop, and his pawn is also an opposite color of his bishop, so he can never defend this pawn. And because his bishop is undefended, rook e8, attacking it with tempo, heading to the e4 square is my goal, attacking this pawn with the rook. Bishop d3, stopping rook e4, but I have rook e3, attacking the bishop again with tempo. King d2, protecting the bishop and attacking the rook. Rook f3, attacking the f4 pawn. King e2, attacking my rook, and I play rook takes f4, asking for a rook trade into a winning endgame, and he happily takes it. And he plays b3 for no reason, and here I could just go back, I can advance, but I play a5, taking space on the queen side and putting my pawns on opposite color to his bishop. I played too safe here because I wasn't really calculating that much, because I was cocky, so I wanted to make sure my opponent had 0 counterplay. So king f3, attacking my bishop, which allows me to go to d6 with tempo, attacking his a3 pawn. He plays a4. Now I play b6, just making sure there's no attack on this pawn in the future. But there was never any threat of this pawn because he can never go a6, and he can never go this way to attack it, or this way. So this move wasn't really the best, and now my opponent goes bishop e2, which does absolutely nothing because he can't do anything. So king f6, bishop c4, another useless move because his bishop can't do anything. There's nothing he can do, all my pieces are on dark squares. And now g5, getting ready to advance. Bishop b5, g4 check, and my opponent goes king g2, king g5, bishop e8. He goes bishop e8, attacking a useless pawn on f7. This also does nothing, so I just advance. Takes. Now f3 check, king f2. Trying to blockade the pawns, but he can't because I control the dark squares. So king f4 is played. Bishop f5, attacking the g4 pawn. c5 check, booting him off the dark squares here. He plays king f1, g3, and it's over. After d6, g2 check, and here he resigned, but he resigned because after e1, there's queen, and checkmate's coming here in a few moves. And that's all the matches I have for today. If you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe. Have a nice day, and peace out.